Hello, in this video we are going to be looking at how to convert units. We'll do a couple of examples, but there will be more examples to follow in the next couple of videos as well. So at our high school we teach what's called the factor label method of converting. I honestly don't know why it's called factor label specifically, but I'll be showing you that method. And basically the premise is units are treated like variables. So I want to show you an example of that first before we get started. Let's say we have something like 2x, and we want to multiply it by y over x. Okay? Well, hopefully those of you watching this, at least for physics purposes, have taken a significant amount of algebra at this point. And you know that when you have an x in the numerator and an x in the denominator, they can cancel out, and we end up with just 2y. Okay? Units like grams can cancel out just like x's can. And so that's kind of the basis for the factor label method. So, the next thing we need to know is conversion factors. Conversion factors have to equal 1, okay? And a conversion factor is something where we're using it to get from one unit to another. So for example, I have a meter stick here, okay? Hopefully you can see most of it. Now this meter stick, I could say, is 1 meter in length. Or I could say it's 100 centimeters in length. Or I could say it's 39, it looks like in 3/8 or so, inches in length. Okay? All of those are exactly the same length. So, if I look at just the inches, or sorry, just the centimeters, 100 centimeters and 1 meter, they're exactly equal lengths. Okay? Which means if I divide them, if I say I've got 1 meter divided by 100 centimeters, I'm dividing one length by the same length. Well, that's kind of like saying 5 divided by 5, which equals 1. So in fact, when I divide 1 meter by 100 centimeters, it equals 1. Now the nice thing about this is that I can take this and multiply anything by 1 over 100, 1 meter over 100 centimeters, and I've got the same value because I'm just multiplying by 1. So we're going to do a lot of multiplying by conversion factors where we're only multiplying by 1. So now we're going to take a look at a couple of examples for how to do this factor label method. So we're going to start out with something like 2.3 centimeters. Okay? Now remember, we want to change how this number looks, but we don't want to actually change the value of it. So if we had a meter to begin with, we still want to end up with a meter, but we might call it 100 centimeters instead. So we've got 2.3 centimeters here. Okay? What we're going to do is take that 2.3 centimeters and we're going to try to multiply it by 1. Okay? Now if you remember, we talked before about how 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. So I could multiply by either 1 meter over 100 centimeters, or I could multiply by 100 centimeters over 1 meter, and I'd still be just multiplying by 1. So here's the other thing. Before we had 2x, and we multiplied by y over x. And the effect of that was to get rid of the x, and we ended up with just the y. So what we want is we want to multiply by something to get rid of this 2.3 centimeters. So I'm going to write this again down here. We're going to take that 2.3 centimeters, and we're going to multiply by some fraction that's equal to 1. Since we're in centimeters currently, we want to end up in meters. I'm going to put 1 meter here and 100 centimeters here. That way, just like the x's, the centimeters cancel out. From here to actually calculate this value, there's a number of ways to do it. I try to teach the most concrete way in general, and that's just so that students who need that really step-by-step process that's kind of easy to remember are able to do that. But there are a lot of students who can just look at this and just do it, and that's fine as well. Okay? The way I look at this is that any number, and we'll do multiple parentheses sometimes, you'll see that in the next example. Anything on the top, all you do is multiply by those numbers. Anything on the bottom, you just divide by those numbers. But you have to hit divide for every one of them, or put them in parentheses. Okay? So we'll take a look at that eventually as well. So I'm going to take 2.3 times by 1, divide by 100. Really, you don't have to do the times by 1, but I just say it just so remember that's what we're doing. Now remember, this is actually equal to 1, so I'm taking a number, I'm timesing by 1. I still have the same value, it just looks different. So 2.3 divided by 100, it turns out, is 0.023. And now, you'll notice that we're left with meters as a unit. And that is our answer. So all we did is we took our number, we changed it from centimeters into meters, we canceled out our centimeters, and we were left with this unit. The unit that's not crossed out should always be the one that you're desiring to get. The last one not crossed out at the very end. So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to take 1 mile. And I want to write 1 mile, and I want to know how many centimeters is it. Okay? So we need to end up in centimeters. What that means is that the last unit not crossed off should eventually be centimeters. Now a couple of things that are helpful to know. 5,280 feet is 1 mile. Those are equal values. I could say this and I could say that, they mean the same thing. Also, there are 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch. Okay? That's going to be needed at some point. Now the nice thing about this conversion factor thing, let's say I take 2.3, I can times by 1, I can times by 1, I can times by 1, and I still have 2.3. So we can draw these parentheses and multiply them numerous times, and we still have the same amount. It just might end up looking a little different with different units. So we're going to take our 1 mile here. Okay? We're going to multiply by a number of conversion factors. Okay? We start with whatever value we're given to begin with, and we want to end up with that centimeters. Now if I want to get rid of miles, I need to find a way, a path to get to centimeters. So what I like to do is diagram out the path. I have 1 mile currently. If I go from there to feet, then I know I can go to inches, 12 inches in a foot. From inches, I know I can go to centimeters. And that's our desired result. So that's our path. For every one of these, we are going to need a conversion factor. We're going to need a conversion factor from miles to feet. We're going to need one from feet to inches. We're going to need one from inches to centimeters. So I should have circled that one as well. Okay? So we need a conversion factor for each of those. So we're going to start with miles. Since miles are on top here, we want our mile conversion factor, which is this, to be on the bottom. Meaning we have 1 mile has 5,280 feet. Okay? Now one thing you'll notice is that the miles cancel with miles. If I stopped here and I figured out what this value was, I'd be in feet. Next, we want to get from feet to inches. Okay? Well, feet are in the numerator right now, so we want to be dividing by feet so that those cancel. Meaning I know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot, so that way these cancel. Then, going from inches to centimeters, now note that this is my third conversion, 1, 2, 3 conversions. I know that there are 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch. Inches are on top here, so I want them in the bottom here. 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. Now this was a slightly easy example in that you'll notice all we're doing is dividing by 1 every time. So to figure out our final solution here, we just need to take our original 1 times 5,280 times 12 times 2.54, and you'll notice the only unit not crossed off is centimeters, the one we want to end up with. So, I'm going to take my calculator. I'm just going to go, believe it or not, I can't do this in my head. We've got 1 times 5,280 times 12 times 2.54, and it's 160934.4. Okay? That's centimeters. We're left with centimeters here. That is our answer. Now I'm going to do 2 things here. First of all, I'm going to do a reasonableness check. I happen to know offhand, because I used to be a track athlete, that the mile is called the 1600, but the 1600 isn't exactly the mile. Okay? So 1600 meters is approximately a mile, pretty close. Well, it turns out, since there are 100 centimeters in a meter, this, in meters, if I move my decimal place over twice to get from centimeters to meters, I would have 1609, which is approximately 1600 meters.